across the Village Media Network and now available wherever you get your favorite podcast. This is Trillium Talk, a weekly look inside Ontario politics at Queen's Park with our team from the Trillium. Back with us this week is Editor-in-Chief Jessica Smith-Cross. Welcome back, Jess. Always great to have you on the show.
Hi, Scott. Always good to see you.
All right. It's the end of the legislative session. School's out for the summer, so to speak. And let's conclude the session by digging into a poll that we've been running that shows the PCs in the lead, which likely isn't surprising to many, but did anything jump out to you that maybe was somewhat surprising with the poll?
Yeah, so for this poll, we commissioned it from Palace Data, a polling firm, and they asked some questions on our behalf. One of the things that we were interested in finding out is what people actually think of this whole move to bring beer and wine and ready-made drinks into corner stores and grocery stores. And I can tell you that it's less popular, according to this poll, than I think the common wisdom thinks it is. There are more people who don't think it's a good idea than we thought. And the other thing we asked people was if they'd still like the idea, if they like it at all, if it costs the government some money. And it depends on how much money it might cost the government. And it's expected to, because the LCBO will lose sales and the government has to pay some money to the folks who own the beer store. So what we found is that people's support for this idea, it declines quite dramatically the more they think that it's going to cost.
What about the Bonnie Crombie attack ads? Have they moved the needle at all for the PCs?
One of the things we found is that a lot of people have seen them. I guess that's not surprising, especially if you watch sports these days. You're going to see these ads. So about 1 in 3 people say they've seen them. Now, some people say it doesn't affect their opinion of her, or they say they like her more. My guess is that a lot of those might be liberals, but a fair chunk of those folks say, yeah, it's impacted how I see the Liberal leader.
All right. Earlier this week, the Financial Accountability Office said the Ford government is underfunding social services and that it hasn't committed enough money to cover its plans and commitments for the coming year. This isn't the first time a government has underfunded something, but this clearly shows a deterioration in the services that Ontarians receive, specifically those with developmental disabilities.
Yeah, so this was an interesting report. The FAO has access to government data on what it's spending and what it's budgeted for. And what they found basically 2 things. For one, going forward, they haven't actually allocated enough money yet to cover their stated plans for social services. So including the autism program, services for adults with developmental disabilities, Ontario Works and ODSP, and other funding for CAS's Children's Aid as well. But the other thing it found was not only have they not planned to spend as much money as it's probably going to cost, there has been deterioration of services, so longer wait lists for things like supportive housing for adults with developmental disabilities. And that's a tough one because, one of the politicians at Queen's Park put it this way: if you're an older person and you have an adult child with a developmental disability, one of your biggest fears is going to be how they do once you're gone. And the lack of supportive housing, or long wait list for supportive housing, obviously makes that a lot worse.
And speaking about wait lists, it's shot up by 10,000 since the Ford government took office. What's the Premier saying about that number and the increase?
Yeah, I got to scrum him last week to ask. And he basically said, we're pouring more money into this than anybody else has been before. And that is actually true. By dollar figures, it's going up, but so is the cost of providing supportive housing right now, because things are more expensive. And the number of people who get supportive housing from the province hasn't increased. It's actually gone down just a little bit since the PCs came to power in 2018.
All right, finally, Jess, late Thursday, there was some shuffling within the Ford cabinet and some pretty big moves. What can you tell us?
Yeah, cabinet shuffles are always exciting for political reporters. We tend to run around Queen's Park trying to figure out who's in, who's out, what's happening, who can get the scoop first. And then we all find out at the same time. And, half the people who said that they knew what was happening were absolutely wrong, actually more than half. So the upshot is cabinet has gotten a lot bigger. We believe this is the biggest cabinet in Ontario history. And what that means for taxpayers is that you're paying more because cabinet ministers get paid more. It's also, it's a management decision, but how many people do you want at the table that makes the decision? That might be up to your leadership style. So one of the big pieces of news is that the education minister and the energy ministers have swapped. So Todd Smith was in energy, now he's in education. Stephen Lecce was education, Now he's going to be in energy. There are new faces around the cabinet, 6 newbies who haven't been there before. And one other interesting change was Steve Clark, who was the housing minister who resigned over the Greenbelt scandal. He's not back in cabinet, but he is the government House leader. And that's a pretty powerful role. You are the person who arranges what happens in the House. You deal with the other parties, you plan the government's legislative agenda, and that's what he's doing now.
What's the scuttlebutt with Clark? Is that move surprising to many, Jess, given what happened with the Greenbelt?
Yeah, I'm sure it's very surprising to many. Before the Greenbelt, I think Steve Clark had a very good reputation, and he is definitely somebody who would be suited for a statesman role like this. Now, the Greenbelt has changed how he's publicly perceived. I think Ford putting him in this role is a vote of confidence in him by Ford.
All right, for the most comprehensive coverage of Ontario politics anywhere, log on and become a Trillium Insider today, and you can do just that at thetrillium.ca. Editor-in-Chief at The Trillium, Jessica Smith-Cross. Thanks as always, Jess. Have a great week.
Thanks, you too.